All right, we'll go ahead and get started today. We have a lot to cover. Thanks so much for joining us. This is CAC's 2024 Grant Opportunities Workshop, and this session is being recorded, and we invite you to introduce yourself using the chat function. You may also enter questions in the chat throughout the session, and our team will be responding throughout, and we'll hold plenty of time for questions at different points throughout today's session. So thank you again and welcome. My name is Jake Sinatra. I'm the Director of Grant Making Strategy and Communications at Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. Thanks again for joining us today. We want to just take a moment and let the CAC team put their voices in the room. Julia?
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a grants manager here at CAC and super excited to meet all of you and see some returning faces here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maya Curtis. I'm the newest grants manager on the team here at CAC, pronouns she, her, and I'm really happy to be here and to meet all of you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Madio. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Associate of Grant Making and Communications here at CAC, and it's nice to see you all today.
Thanks. And again, welcome. If you're just joining us, we invite you to introduce yourself using the chat function. And before we proceed, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we stand on and the place that we call Cuyahoga County. This is land that was claimed by the United States government through forced displacement and treaties negotiated in bad faith. We acknowledge those of the Shawnee, Miami, Erie, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Haudenosaunee Confederacy, whose lands we stand on, and the thousands of Native Americans representing over 100 tribes who currently live in Northeast Ohio today. And we thank the Lake Erie Native American Council for helping us to develop this acknowledgement. Cuyahoga Arts and Culture also values equity. We choose to lead with racial equity in our work because the creation and perpetuation of racial inequalities is embedded into government and grant making. We confront the white supremacy that resides in our work because racial inequities across all indicators of success are deep and pervasive. We also recognize the power and potential of the organizations who produce arts and culture programming as bearers of culture. These institutions have the power to write the narrative about who belongs and who is valued. We encourage organizations to connect with resources to advance equity in their work, and you can visit our website at cacgrants.org/equity or contact anyone on our team to learn more. At this time and now, I'll turn it over to my teammates to take you through our agenda and the content of today's Grant Opportunities Workshop. Laura?
Great. Thanks, Jake. Again, welcome to everyone joining us this afternoon. Will be helpful to you and your organizations as you prepare for CAC's eligibility check and application deadlines over the next several weeks. In today's workshop, we'll cover CAC's mission, history, and purpose here in Cuyahoga County. We'll give an overview of 2024 grant opportunities, CAC's project support, cultural heritage, and general operating support grants, and we'll outline next steps for organizations. And then, of course, we'll leave room for questions at the end. First, I'll start with a brief overview of what CAC is, what we do, and how we do it. Cuyahoga Arts and Culture is the public funder for arts and culture in Cuyahoga County and the largest funder of arts and culture in the region. Cuyahoga County residents created CAC in 2006 when they approved a tax on cigarettes to support arts and culture in our community. This levy was renewed in 2015 and now runs through 2027. We are an independent political subdivision of the state of Ohio. Though we work closely with our local elected officials, we are not a part of county government. CAC has invested more than $230 million in more than 470 organizations since 2007. And in 2023, CAC is investing over $12 million through grants to organizations who bring art and culture to life in our community. At CAC, we have three primary grants: general operating support, cultural heritage, and project support. General operating support grants provide unrestricted multi-year support grants to arts and cultural organizations based in and serving Cuyahoga County. Cultural heritage provides flexible funding for organizations with a primary mission of arts and culture that are representative of a culturally specific population. Project support promotes and encourages the breadth of arts and cultural programming in our community by funding projects of all sizes in Cuyahoga County. In addition to our 3 primary grants, we also support resident-led grant-making and support for artist grants, and we'll share more about that a little later in today's presentation. As a public funder, the centering of residents and community vibrancy is central to our work. Our funding criteria are meant to ensure grant recipients foster a sense of belonging for all residents through their publicly funded activities. CAC's funding criteria are public benefit, an organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community; artistic and cultural vibrancy, an organization's ability to create relevant, engaging work; and organizational capacity, an organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its resources or project. As CAC is a public funder of arts and culture, public benefit carries the most weight, and that is true for all of CAC's grants. We'll talk more about our funding criteria and how it's connected to our application process in future workshops. Outside of our 3 primary grants, CAC also has more ways that we're investing in our arts and cultural community. Our resident-led grant-making work includes partnering with IOB, which stands for In Our Backyards, to match crowdfunding campaigns, and with Neighborhood Connections to co-fund Neighbor Up grants to arts and cultural projects. These opportunities are good for small organizations that aren't eligible for CAC's primary grant programs. For example, your first arts and culture project or groups that are not yet established as a 501c3 organization. And we'll drop a link in the chat that connects to these projects. Cuyahoga Arts and Culture was created to make grants to nonprofits, so our support for artists grants provide resources to artists through Assembly for the Arts, Spaces, Julia de Burgos Cultural Arts Center, and Caramoo House. Arts and Culture Network Night is a great way to connect with artists, arts organizations, employees, and other creatives for relationship building, mutual support, and to spark new initiatives. Our next network night will be on Thursday, June 22nd from 6 to 8 p.m. and we'll share some information about that program where all are welcome. Finally, clevelandartsevents.com is a great way to connect with Cuyahoga County's vibrant arts and culture scene. We invite you to visit clevelandartsevents.com to view or join our directory of artists, post a portfolio or upcoming event, and to view current jobs and calls for artists. Before we dig into the eligibility criteria for this year's grants, I want to orient you to where you can find information beyond this workshop. CACgrants.org is our website, and it has some very useful tools for the grant application period, the most important being the grant guidelines. We have a set of guidelines for each grant program. These are the board-approved documents that serve as a roadmap for the grant application and program year. All the information we're discussing in this workshop connects back to those guidelines, and so I recommend anyone applying for a grant review that document carefully. To find the guidelines, you'll click Grant Programs across the top and then select the project you're applying for. So if you're applying for project support, you'll select Project Support. And then when you scroll down, you'll find a blue button that says 2024 Project Support Guidelines. I also want to mention that we are getting ready to launch a new website this summer, so things may look a bit different, but should be even easier to find in the near future. And we'll be sure to contact you with more information when that happens. These grant program pages also have other useful information to refer to, like workshops, deadlines, and the link to the online application and reporting system. That is the place where you will submit your eligibility check, which we'll speak to shortly. I will now turn it over to Maya, who will talk a bit about project support.
Thank you, Laura. Hi, my name is Maya. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a grants manager on the team and I lead our project support work. The purpose of Cuyahoga Arts and Culture's project support grant is to promote public access and encourage the breadth of arts and cultural programming in our community by supporting Cuyahoga County-based projects. We define project as a specific connected set of activities with a beginning and an end, explicit goals, objectives, and a predetermined cost that does not equal the organization's total annual budget. We'll talk about that more on the next slide. For project grants, we require a one-to-one grant match, which is required for those that are having a maximum grant request amount of $5,000 or less. 50% of the match can be in kind. For grants over $5,000, the match must be cash. Other grants, donations, ticket revenue, or sponsorships are great examples of cash matches. So What is a project? For us, projects may be one-time events, such as a festival or exhibit, or defined as a series of events, such as a roster of classes or a series of productions. Projects must start and end in the 2024 calendar year, so the dates of your project must fit within between January 1st, 2024 and December 31st, 2024. Projects must be arts or cultural activities with a public art and culture component. We'll talk more about how we define arts and culture on the next slide. Projects must take place in Cuyahoga County. The project must include a public programming component. This can include virtual events as long as it's for Cuyahoga County residents. And so a great example for that would be a mural project alone would not qualify as a project with a public programming component. But for example, if a nature center was doing a mural project with a floral mural project, and they were also going to be talking about pollination, and they were going to do workshops around pollinating and flowers, and maybe the grand reveal of the mural has a public event component where residents are invited to come to the nature center and plant flowers and learn about beekeeping or something like that, that has a public programming component in addition to the mural that was presented. And open to the public does not mean that the project or program must be free. You can have ticketed events that are still public, that are still opening and welcoming to the community as a whole. On. Arts and culture is defined in the Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 3381, which is CAC's enabling law, as including but not limited to literature, theater, music, dance, ballet, painting, sculpture, photography, motion pictures, architecture, archaeology, history, natural history, or the natural sciences. Our definition is broad and can include many different types of projects, but we do have specific determinations of what is and isn't arts and culture. It's also important to point out that CAC's definition of arts and culture includes the natural sciences. This means that we fund science and nature-based programming, in addition to other disciplines like music, performing arts, and visual art. For us to fund projects, they must fit within this definition. If you have questions, please feel free to contact CAC staff. Project support. Who is eligible to be eligible for the 2023 project support grant program? Applicant organizations must meet all of the following eligibility criteria. You must have a permanent and viable base of operations in Cuyahoga County, be a 501c3 organization, have produced or presented arts or culture programs open to the public within the previous 2 years prior to May 31st, 2023. Provide the required financial documents. All organizations must provide a 990, either 990, 990N, or 990EZ for the most recently completed fiscal year. Incorporated and authorized to do business in Ohio as verified by the Ohio Secretary of State. Within these eligibility requirements, many of the organizations that receive CAC funding do not have a primary mission of arts and culture, but are doing amazing arts and cultural programming through their work. Current and past grant recipients have included community development corporations, after-school programs, and mental health agencies, as well as organizations that focus only on arts and culture programming. For a list of types of organizations who are ineligible to apply, please see our guidelines. Some examples include religious institutions without a separate 501c3, private non-operating foundations, units of government, and fundraising organizations. Also, like friends of groups. Again, see the guidelines for a full listing of groups that would be ineligible to apply for project support grants. For grant sizes, The maximum grant amount within project support is $20,000. Applicants with a primary mission of arts and culture can receive up to $5,000 for those who are new applicants, and all first-time applicants are required to apply to project support first. So if you're a first-time applicant or a new applicant, you can receive up to $5,000. And if you are submitting a 990N, you can receive up to $5,000. Those who are submitting 990 or 990EZ, we calculate that by using 25% of your total expenses to calculate your maximum grant amount. Applicants without a primary mission of arts and culture, again, you can receive up to $5,000 if you are a new applicant and or if you are submitting a 990N. Those who are submitting 990s or 990EZ plus one prior project support grant, this will be calculated by 25% of your total expenses from your prior final report. If you've had multiple years of project support grants, we look at the last 2 final reports and choose the one with the highest total expenses. When an organization is deemed eligible through the eligibility check, which is due on June 1st, that is when you will receive your maximum grant amount that an applicant can request. That will be sent to you via email, is determined by CAC staff as outlined here. Applicants will be notified of this amount when they are notified of their eligibility. And again, these are some of the basic guidelines that, are the guidelines for calculating our maximum grant amounts. So new this year for 2023 grantees is the opportunity to bypass the application and panel review stage if you are completing the same project as your approved 2023 project. This only applies to current project support grant recipients. Those groups must still complete the eligibility check, which is due June 1st and is open currently. So you can get started on that whenever you're ready. And if you are a current 2023 project support grantee and have questions about this option on your project plans for 2024, please reach out to your grant manager. But through the eligibility check, there will be a question that asks if you are a 2023 grant recipient. And if you are and you will select yes, it will lead you to additional questions that will ask if you are interested in bypassing the application and panel review process. And then it will also ask you questions around what factors will be changing in your project this year compared to your approved 2023 grant. If you are deemed eligible, we will ask you to complete a project information form, which will be due August 3rd. This will be a very brief form that will just have you update your budget, financials, the location of your project, dates, timeline, people who are working on the project, just the bare minimum basic information that we need to assess what your project is going forward. And then also we're asking that you complete the cultural data profile for those who have a grant amount that is more than $5,000 that they received in 2023. And that you also complete your final report, which will be due 30 days after your project completion. I know many people have asked me what counts as the same project. And I ask that if you are concerned that you're not completing the same project or that too many factors are changing, again, through the eligibility check, you will submit every change that will be changing for your project. And we will inform you if your project is too different than your initial project. And at that point, you'll have the opportunity to just move forward with completing an application for your project this year. Things that would count as the same project is if you are doing a project, but it is a different time of the year, different location, different arts and cultural professionals are working on the project, and engages a different set of people for the same community. So for example, if you do a summer concert series, and this year it's going to be at a different public park and you are engaging different musicians this year, but it is within the same theme of the project that was approved in 2023, but a couple of those factors are changing. That would be the same project. But again, it is most important that you submit your eligibility check and that you are submitting all of the changes that you at this point foresee changing. I know that at this point, some of you guys might not know the exact time or location or all of those factors, but if you anticipate that those factors might change, please just list those out as factors that could potentially be changing in your project moving forward. That will be very helpful. And if you do have questions around that, I know this is the first year that we're doing this, please contact your grant manager and we'll be happy to walk through with you your questions that you might have. Let's see. And I also wanted to mention that if you are interested in just going through your panel application process again this year, that is absolutely option. You don't have to bypass the application and panel review process. If you say yes, you are a 2023 grant recipient in your eligibility check, you have the option to then say that you are interested in completing the application and panel review process moving forward, and that is fine as well. Moving forward, here are a few pictures from some of the events and activities that have been supported in part by CAC funding in the past. We're really excited to hear about your 2024 projects, but before we move on to other grant opportunities, I wanted to pause to see if there were any questions about anything we've covered.
Maya, there's a couple questions in the chat. I'll read the first one. The first one is someone who's not understanding the discrepancy between the $20,000 max and the $5,000 limit. Can you clarify that?
Yes. So the $5,000 maximum request amount, and again, this is up to. So if you have a project that is less than 5,000 or you need just 3,000, that is absolutely fine as well. But that is determined for those who are new applicants. So this is your first time applying for a grant with CAC. Your maximum grant amount would be $5,000. And then also if you are submitting a 990N, which is that short form, more like a postcard 990, then your maximum grant amount in that moment would also be $5,000. For those who are submitting 990s or 990EZ, the calculation is different. You're providing more of your financials to us, and we are then basing off, sorry, I want to go back really quickly for myself. For those who have a primary mission of arts and culture, 25% of your total expenses. So this wouldn't, your maximum wouldn't be over 20,000. That's the maximum grant for project support. But based on your expenses, we will then send you an email that will show your maximum grant amount. So it might say your maximum grant request amount can be 16,000, and then you would submit your application request based on your maximum grant request amount and the needs of your project. That answers the question. And then again, that is different for those who are applicants without a primary mission of arts and culture. That is factored by the total expenses of your project support final report from the previous year. And it's 25% of those total expenses. I hope that clarified it a little bit.
Another question in here, I think I'll just defer. It's someone asking, can you please talk about the eligibility check? We're going to get to that after we talk through the eligibility requirements for all of our programs, so stay tuned on that one. Another question here is, can you define what you mean by public? We were interested in doing a series of classes specifically for justice-involved people and their families.
Yes. Hold on one moment. Sorry, I am new, so I just want to make sure that I'm not misspeaking. So a public event is a general public, it's an event that's created, produced, and presented and supported for the residents of Cuyahoga County. So this really just means like you can have an event that maybe is for a specific group of Cuyahoga County residents. So maybe it's for an elderly community and it's really geared towards those who are ages 60 and up. That's fine, but it shouldn't be a private event where like a membership is required to participate in the event. It's okay if there is a public event that is for like line dancing for those who are 60 and up, and it's $5 to attend, but it is open for those who are interested and part of that community to participate in.
Absolutely. Yeah, a segment of the public that shares, you know, a certain set of experiences is fine. To show that it's public, we just ask that it be something that you advertise for publicly. So, you know, you're allowed to hold a summer camp that is only open to fifth graders, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't advertise it publicly to invite fifth graders. So yeah, that's a really good question. And Maya got it on the head. Another question here. If we say the project is the same for 2024 as in 2023, would the grant award be the same? What if we wanted to improve our application from 2023 so that we might be awarded a larger grant?
So for those who are deemed eligible and are bypassing the application and panel review process, we are basing your grant award off of the grant that you received in 2023. And just as a note, CAC does anticipate that grant amounts will be reduced to fit the budget sizes. But if you think that you could have a higher panel score and you want to go back and just submit your application again, that is completely fine. This is partially based off of your panel score that you're receiving. So if you think that you could receive a higher panel score, then you are definitely invited to go through the application and panel review process for the 2024 application. Or if your budget is significantly changing and you need more or less money than you had requested before, then that might be a reason for you to go through the panel and application review process again this year.
The next question, if you're a nonprofit that does not have a primary mission of arts and culture that received funding last year, the total amount you will be able to apply for 2024 will be 25% of the total expenses in your grant report. Is that correct?
This is correct.
And one thing I'll add here is that if you had a relatively small project and 25% comes out to be like $900 or something, we still bump your max grant amount request up to $5,000. So that's the smallest recommended grant amount that we will send. So there's kind of bookends there. So the smallest recommended grant amount will be $5,000. Another question. So new applicants cannot apply for anything over $5,000, even if providing a 990.
This is correct.
Another question, does it help to have an account with GuideStar, especially if the organization is in the platinum level? Congratulations on that.
Yes, I think it does help. Julia, do you have any
follow-up? No, we don't weigh it into our application at all. Another question here, can any other types of entities apply for funding besides 501c3 organizations such as schools, libraries, or park systems?
No, we only accept applications for those with a 501c3 status.
And here's a last question. After this, please hold your questions for the end and we'll get to them. Could a panel review also lead you to less money if the data in your 2024 application is identical or nearly identical to your 2023 application?
Julie, I'm going to ask for support on that. I assume
Sure.
like there's a different set of people reviewing the.
Yep. The panel review is going to be independent of whatever happened in 2023. And so it's a new set of panelists who are looking at your application fresh. We have figured out that lots of our organizations apply with the same projects each year, which is why we have moved to pass. But applying with roughly the same project will not lead to less money necessarily. Each year is a fresh year for that panel score. And so it's just entirely dependent on what the panel scores.
Okay. That was the last question for now. And again, we will save time for questions at the end, and you're always welcome to contact us directly if you have any other questions that come up for you. This concludes our section on the CAC project support, and I will now turn it over to my colleague, Julia.
All right, so we are moving on to talk about the 24-25 Cultural Heritage Grant. So we'll touch on the program goals, eligibility, grant amounts, and other important information for the Cultural Heritage Grant. And as a reminder, you can find all of the important information you need about this process in our 2024 guidelines. So we have a separate set of guidelines for each grant program, and hopefully one of my colleagues can drop in the chat the link to the Cultural Heritage one. So the purpose of the Cultural Heritage Grant is to support and strengthen the community by providing flexible support to organizations that are representative of a culturally specific population. The Cultural Heritage Grant is not a project-based grant, but flexible funding for a whole organization. Successful applicants will have a primary mission to create, produce, present, or provide arts and cultural services for the public. It will have a history of vibrant arts and culture programming. It will have a strong organizational capacity to carry out their work, and the organization will be authentically representative of the culturally specific population. Starting this year, the Cultural Heritage Grant is a 2-year commitment and will accept applications on odd years along the same lines as our GOS, General Operating Support Grant. So to be eligible for the Cultural Heritage Grant, organizations must meet all of the following criteria. They must have a primary mission to produce, present, or create programs or activities in areas directly concerned with arts or cultural heritage for the general public. They must have a permanent and viable base in Cuyahoga County for at least 2 years prior to June 1st of this year. They must be cultural heritage organizations, which are authentically representative of the population they serve, which I'll elaborate on that in just a minute. They must be 501c3 organizations as verified by GuideStar's charity check. They must be incorporated and authorized to do business in Ohio as verified by the Ohio Secretary of State. Organizations must complete IRS Form 990 or 990EZ for their fiscal years 2021 and 2022. So organizations that have 990 ends will not be eligible for this program. And they must have previously received and successfully completed at least 2 project support grants through Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. And the last one here is having an annual operating budget up to $500,000. So on the other side of the table, we've listed a few types of organizations that are not eligible for this grant program, but please see the guidelines for the full listing here. So successful cultural heritage applicant organizations must be authentically representative of the culturally specific population they serve. And I've said this a few times now, and I think this will also answer one of the questions coming up in the chat. For example, American Indian or Alaska Native, Asian, Black or African American, Hispanic or Latino, Latina, Latinx, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, North African, or other culturally specific population, which is one that has a shared history and geography. So an LGBT community organization would not meet these requirements to be a cultural heritage organization. So organizations will demonstrate this through a clear expression that the organization is deeply rooted in and able to authentically express the experiences of that culturally specific population, as well as arts and culture programming that is focused on and reflective of the population as well. Grant sizes for the Cultural Heritage Grant are based on a formula that includes organizational budget sizes for all of the cultural heritage groups recommended for funding, And so grant sizes are not known until after the panel process, when we know which organizations will be recommended for funding. That said, grant sizes will not be smaller than what your grant would be in project support and will range from $5,000 to $30,000. Additionally, we're happy to share that the current cultural heritage grantees will only need to complete an eligibility check and not the full application in order to be recommended for funding for 2024. So again, I'll pause here, and before we move on to the general operating support grant, we'll see if there's any questions specifically around cultural heritage. And if anything comes to mind after this, we'll have time at the end as well.
There's one question in the chat, Julia, asking if organizations with a higher budget are not eligible.
Yes, if the organization's budget is more than $500,000, they won't be eligible for this program. All right, we'll move on to the next slide. Again, if more questions come up, save those for the end and we will have plenty of time there. So this year, our general operating support program will also be open for applications for the grant period of the next 2 years. You can find all the important information you need about this process in the guidelines for GOS. Thank you for dropping those in the chat. The goal of the GOS program is to strengthen community through meaningful multi-year core support grants to arts and culture organizations based in and serving Cuyahoga County. Successful applicants will have a primary mission to create, produce, present, or provide arts or cultural services to the public, a history of vibrant artistic or cultural programming, and strong organizational capacity to carry out this work. Consistent with previous years, current 2023 grantees who have received 4 consecutive years of CAC funding will only need to complete the eligibility check and not the full application process in order to be recommended for 2024 funding. To be eligible for the GOS grant programs, organizations must meet all of the eligibility criteria. Like I said, they must be arts and culture organizations with their primary mission of arts and culture. Organizations must have a permanent and viable base in Cuyahoga County for at least 3 years prior to June 1st of this year. This means a business address in the county, and they must conduct the majority of its local programming and services in the county for residents and visitors of the county. Organizations must exist as a 501c3 organization for at least 3 years or be a successor to an arts and culture organization that has been 501c3 for at least 5 years prior to June 1st of this year. Organizations must employ for a minimum of 2 years prior to June 1st, at least one paid professional arts and culture or administrative staff person who's working a minimum of 20 hours a week at or above the state designated minimum wage. This staff person must receive an IRS Form W-2 from the organization, reporting their wages and withheld taxes, and they must have approval from the organization's board to sign for financial transactions and grant-related documents. Next is that the organization must have independently certified and audited financial statements for fiscal years 20, 21, and 22 if the total expenses are over $750,000. If the total expenses are less than $750,000, they must provide independently certified reviewed financial statements or audited statements. So you have the option when your organization is in that category. They must complete IRS Form 990 or 990EZ. They must be incorporated and authorized to do business in the state of Ohio. They must meet the minimum income threshold of $100,000 as determined by the financial review, audit, or 990 for the fiscal year 22. And organizations must have previously received and successfully completed at least 2 project support grants from Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. So again, on the other side of this table, we've listed a few types of organizations that are not eligible, but you can take a look at the guidelines to see the comprehensive list there. So the next thing that we're going to do is get into the steps of the application process and the eligibility check, but I will again pause here to see if there's any questions about anything we've covered for general operating support. I see that there's one here. Will you ever consider 501c4? Nope, our grants are for 501c3 organizations.
There's one other question jumping back to cultural heritage, asking, do we want to hold that till the end?
No, I can answer it now.
Okay. Asking if a museum offering abolition history would be eligible for cultural heritage or just project support.
It's hard to say right off the bat because there's not much information, and the eligibility check is what we would do to actually confirm that. What I'll say though is that if you complete an eligibility check for cultural heritage and we decide that it's not eligible, we would defer that e-check into the project support pipeline, I guess is the word I'll use. And so you won't be written off if you're not eligible because you likely would be eligible for project support. So if you believe that you might be, I would recommend doing the cultural heritage eligibility check, and then we would decide which track to put the organization on from there.
The next question is, does this mean you cannot have a project support and a general operating support grant at the same time?
That's correct. You can only apply for or receive one CAC grant per grant cycle.
And then what about organizations that are waiting on approval for a 501c3?
You have to be a 501c3 by the time of the eligibility check deadline. So if you think it's going to come in the next few weeks, you can wait and submit an e-check as long as you've got that letter and confirmation before June 1st of this year.
For the employment requirement for GOS, would you consider an employee working 20 hours per week but paid via 1099?
No, it has to be a W-2 employee with taxes withheld from their paycheck.
Can an organization apply for both project support and GOS from the start, or should we rely on your decision to move one from GOS to project?
So you should submit one eligibility check and one application this year. You won't be able to submit two applications. Thanks for asking for clarity around that. But again, if you are curious about applying for either the cultural heritage or general operating support grant and aren't sure if you'll be eligible, go ahead and submit the eligibility check for that program. And if we decide it's not eligible, we would bounce it back to project support. Thanks for asking, Leah. All right, with that, I will pass it back to, oh no, this is still me, just kidding. So what's next with the application timeline? So for all of our grant opportunities, the eligibility check is due by June 1st, that's Thursday, and it's due at 4:30 p.m. All applicants and current grantees must complete the eligibility check, regardless of whether you are required to do the application or not. So if your organization is deemed eligible, you will then gain access to the application, which is due on Thursday, August 3rd at 4:30 p.m. We'll aim to approve e-checks on a rolling basis. And so the earlier that you submit that step, the longer time you'll have access to the application. And I do anticipate that we'll kind of have a backlog right there around the deadline. So early submissions are much appreciated on our end. In mid-September, applications that were approved to go to panel are reviewed by a panel of experts from outside of our region using our funding criteria to determine whether your application will be recommended to receive funding. In November, the CAC board will approve the allocation of funding for these grants and the grant awards for 2024. And then, of course, calendar year 2024 is the grant period. And so from here, I think now I'll turn it back to Laura, who's going to share some details about the e-check forms.
Thanks, Julia. So as Julia said, the first 2024 grant requirement is the eligibility check process. So organizations will submit a short form and required materials to CAC, which will determine if your organization is eligible to apply for CAC funding. This is a helpful step so you can learn if you are eligible for CAC funding before going through the complete application process. Regardless of which grant you aim to apply for, you'll submit basic organizational information such as your address, mission, and history. You'll show that your organization is registered to do business in the state of Ohio, and you'll upload the 990 or 990s required for the specific grant program you're aiming to apply for. You'll also enter your EIN in a 501c3 verification form. Project support applicants who have not received a CAC grant since 2019 will need to upload examples or materials demonstrating that you've produced public arts and culture programming in the last 2 years. Materials should be dated to show when they took place, should be clearly connected to your organization, and should clarify how they were a public program. For example, a screenshot to a Facebook event, photos or videos or flyers would all be acceptable options here. For the Cultural Heritage Grant, you'll provide evidence to show that your organization is a cultural heritage organization. That is information about the cultural identity of your identity information for your staff and board, as well as materials and details around the content of your arts and culture programming. For general operating support, you will need the same materials as well as your financial audits or reviews based on your organizational budget. The eligibility check is completed using our online application and reporting system. This is the same system we used last year, which can be found by going to the grants page on our website or directly by going to cacgrants.smapply.org. Returning applicants can use their same login information, and new applicants will need to create an account. Returning applicants will be taken to their current forms for your 2023 grant information. To start the new e-check for 2024, you'll click Applications at the top. Select which grant you aim to apply for, and you'll then have 2 tasks to complete: the eligibility form and the 501c3 verification. After completing both tasks, marking both as complete, you'll be able to hit the final submit button. Your eligibility check is not complete and submitted until you've done that step and received a confirmation email. So you'll want to make sure that you get that confirmation email. As part of your eligibility form, you'll designate a primary contact at your organization who will receive all communications from CAC going forward. So you'll want to be sure that that person understands their role and is a regular email checker. After eligibility check, if required, eligible applicants will move forward to the application process. The application requirements are similar to previous years if you are a returning applicant. We'll share more information about the application process in our upcoming application workshops. Once full application materials are submitted by August 3rd, the next step is panel review. We invite panels of experts from outside of our region to review applications in either written or interactive panel reviews. Those scores and recommendations then go to our board for approval. After funding recommendations are approved by the board in November, the 2024 grant year begins on January 1st, 2024. For project support grantees, a final report is due 30 days after the project is complete. Cultural heritage and general operating support grantees complete mid-year check-ins or reports and year-end reports. All grantees are required to post their public arts and culture events on clevelandartsevents.com and credit CAC in your programming. We'll talk more about that over the course of the application process and grant year, but I encourage you to visit the website if you haven't already to learn more about events happening in our region. Again, as a reminder, you can find all this information and more in the 2024 guidelines documents. So before we close, I wanted to offer some additional opportunities to connect with our team for support. Links to register to all of these upcoming opportunities are on our website. So we will have upcoming office hours hosted by our team to help with eligibility check process and requirements. This is an informal space just for applicants to help answer any final questions as you move through the eligibility check. In July, we'll have workshops on the CDP or Cultural Data Project hosted by SMU Data Arts. And then also in July, we'll have workshops specifically for the application process, along with 2 more office hours around this step.
Thank you, Laura. And if someone from the team wants to drop in a link to our flyer, there it is. You can see all of those descriptions for all those technical assistance opportunities, as well as links to register. They're all virtual, and we really encourage you to connect with our team at various times throughout this process whenever you have questions. So thank you so much for joining us for today's Grant Opportunities Workshop. We are now going to open the chat for additional questions. I know there are a couple there already that we'll come back to about any of the content we presented today. So as a reminder, this workshop, I'll say before we jump back, is being recorded, and you will receive a copy of the presentation slides as well as the recording of today's session. So our team is really here to support you, and we want you to be successful in your application. Our contact information is all here for you. It's listed on our website, and please feel free to be in touch with us as you move through the process. I really encourage you to look at those guidelines documents that the links have been dropped in the chat. There are also links within those documents to complete instructions and questions for both the eligibility check and application, which really can help you as you navigate the process. So with that, I'll turn it back to my team here to answer some of these questions that have been in the chat. We also encourage you to drop any additional questions in the chat at this time.
I see one. What is the maximum grant for general operating support? So the GOS grants are determined based on a formula that includes each organization's budget alongside the whole allocation. And so there's not a set number that is the maximum grant amount, but the largest grant is going to be adjusted in proportion to the changes in our allocation. So a complex technical question to say there is no set maximum grant amount. The largest organizations get nearing on $1 million, and the smallest ones get around $20,000. So it varies very widely. The next question here for general operating applicants or past grantees, what year or years of 990s are required? So at this point in the year, most organizations should have their 2022 990 completed and submitted. So that is the 990 that we are requesting. If you don't have that one yet, we will accept the 2021 990 alongside an extension filing. Basically, that shows that you are still in good standing with the IRS. So either your fiscal year 22 or your fiscal year 21 with the extension.
There's another question here about is equipment required for a project? Is that an eligible expense for a project? I will say it's part of the cost of doing the project as a project expense. That's an eligible expense. If it's equipment to purchase, that probably falls under the category of an ineligible project expense. And we can get into those in much more detail, both in the guidelines and in our upcoming application workshops. A question about the one-to-one match as well. Can that include purchasing materials for the project again, or must the match be cash? I think that's asking, yeah, go ahead, Maya.
No, okay. I was going to hear what you were saying. I was going to ask for a clarifying.
So the matching requirement for all of our programs is about on the revenue side of the budget. So this is meaning that for every dollar that CAC is contributing to the project, that a dollar must be either raised or contributed from the organization's general fund. And obviously you heard in project support for those small grants of less than $5,000, some of that can come from in-kind donations. So there's more details on that in the project support guidelines, but if there's specific questions, we encourage you to reach out to our team as you're putting your application together. Any other questions at this time? I think we got to all of them. If you have others, we encourage you to reach out. Our team is here to serve you, and we thank you all for your time and attention today. Oh. All right, thanks so much.